acknowledge our Talmud Torah sponsor for the month of Tammuz, which is Uncle Mike Holtzman. Thank you, Uncle Mike. Okay, so we're in the middle here discussing a machlokas between Rav and Shmuel about whether you can be makdish a sada during the Shemitah, during the Yovel year or not. We talked about the fact they also argue about sale, but here we're talking about hektish. So ask the Gemara, Tashma, come in here. It says in our Mishnah, V'lo go'alin achar Yovel pachas mishana. So it's saying, and that we're not goel after the Yovel less than 1 year. So Bishlam Shmuel. So according to Shmuel, it's easy to understand how we're gonna read the Mishnah. Lo go'alin achar Yovel pachas mishana. So Rashi explains, what does that mean? That it's telling you. Kamash Malan, Rashi says, Masnisin, the Mishnah tells us the Bishnas Yovel Atzma in Mektisha Ein Tzarech Ligo Dolei Kadsha. So what he's saying is, Logal in Achar Yovel Pachas Mishana, he's saying is during the year of Yovel itself. Once you pass the point at the beginning of the Yovel year where fields go out, he says that if you were to be makdish the field during that year that follows, you would not need to be poded because it doesn't work. So we say, okay, that's a good way to understand the Mishnah according to Shmuel. He says, El Rav, my Acher Yovel. My Acher Yovel. Let's see what this is. Take out the word. My Acher Yovel. In other words, what does that mean that the year after Yovel you can't be Goel? According to Rav, the count for Geula starts as soon as Yovel hits. Someone could be makdish a field and then they have to be poded. So what's this idea that you can't do it after Yovel? After Yovel works within the first year, you can't be Goel. So the Gemara answers that Rav would tell you, Mi savris acher Yovel mamish. Do you think this means that after Yovel, once we hit the period of Yovel, that you can't be poded for a year? He says, "My acher Yovel." No. What does it mean when it says that you're not goel after Yovel? You're not goel the field for less than a year. Pachas mishana, says the Gemara, top of Chafei Amud Aleph, be'emtza Yovel. It's not talking about literally the year after Yovel. It's talking about any point during the Yovel cycle. And so, what's its point? The kol kama de lo malya shana lo migrale. And when it says that you're not goel the field for less than a year, it's not saying less than a year after Yovel. It's saying you're not goel the field in increments of less than a year. Pachas mishana, that if 20, 30, 40 years into Yovel, that you only calculate in full years. You don't calculate in partial years. So that's what it's telling you when it says v'lo goel in achar Yovel pachas mishana. Is saying that after Yovel hits, when you're able to be goel the field, you're not goel it for anything less than an increment of a year. So says the Gemara, my kamashmal, what are you telling us? You're telling me that we don't count months for hektish. We actually, so says the Gemara, so we learned in the Mishnah yesterday that we are not mechashiv chadashim with hektish. What does that mean? So that tells you as follows, that let's say Rashi uses the example that if you have 5.5 years left till Yovel, so you might say, okay, it's a sela and a pundion per year, so I'm going to have 5 slayim, 5 punyanim, and I'm going to have a half a sela and a half a pundion as well. So 5.5 slayim and 5.5 punyanim. So the Mishnah is telling us, no, it doesn't work that way. If there are any months remaining in the year, so if it's 5.5 years remaining, so you're only 6 months through the year, we don't count those 6 months at all, and you have to be poded for 6 years, even though you've already done half of the 6th year has passed. You don't get to deduct a sela and pudiyim for that, because with hektish we don't count months. So now the Gemara is asking the question, is saying, you're telling me that when the Mishnah says v'lo goel and achar Yovel pachas mishana, that you're not goel after Yovel, doesn't mean literally right after Yovel in terms of time. It means any time after Yovel, that you don't go in increments less than a year. But what's your point? We learned that in the Mishnah right after this. In other words, if you remember, the Mishnah said, so it said, v'lo goel and achar Yovel pachas mishana achas, And then it said, Ein mechashvim chadashim lahekdesh. So, in other words, it's repeating itself, saying the same thing twice. So, according to you, Rav, who's trying to understand, v'lo go anachar yovel pachas mishana means you only go in increments of a year. How could that be the Mishnah's point? The Mishnah says that expressly immediately afterwards. So the Gemara answers, Rav would tell you, matam ka'amar. No, it's not repeating itself twice. It's telling you what's the reason. So how do you read it? Matam l'goel l'achar yovel pachas mishana achas. In other words, why is it in the Mishnah? The Mishnah says we're not goel when we're dealing at some later point in yovel. We're not goel in an increment of less than a year. Why is that? Mishum de'ein machashvim chadashim hekdesh. Because we don't count months for hekdesh and we only count full years. So the Mishnah is not repeating itself. It's clarifying. It's saying we're not goel less than a year in increments of less than a year because for hekdesh's purposes we don't count months. Continues the Gemara, or the Gemara quotes the Mishnah. So we say Taner Habanan. So we learn in a brayso. Minayin she'en mechashvin chadashim hekdesh. Where do we get this idea that you can't do half a year and therefore a half a sela and put you? In other words, why is it you can't? Talmud Lomer says the brayso v'chishev lo hakoin es hakesef al pi hashanim anosaros. So it says the pasuk is written that if someone is achar yovel yakdish sadeu, that so we don't have a full yovel period that he's redeeming. So it says the kohen calculates for him the kesef based on the years that remain until the shnasa yovel, until the coming of the yovel. So what do you see from the pasuk? You see shanim atamachashev yatamachashev chadashim. So it says that you calculate the amount that's owed based on the number of years that remain. So you see that the increment for purposes of a hekdesh is a year and it's not months. Okay. Minayin shematarotza lasas chadashim lashana osa. So and how do I know that? In other words, we said in the Mishnah that for our purposes with hekdesh we don't count for months, but hekdesh for its own purposes could count for months. The language in the Mishnah was aval hekdesh mechashev chadashim. So now the brayso is continuing, and what does it say? That if hekdesh wants to make months, it can. So it says heichidami kigon da akdeshe bepalgo da arboim v'tamni. So it says what would be the case that if hekdesh is, in other words, if someone is makdish a field and he's poda it, Tosfos points out that he's poda it 48 and a half years into the yovel period. So how much is left? 1.5 years. So we just learned the halacha that we're not mechashiv chadashim. So therefore, how would we treat it if we were coming to this? We would treat it as 2 years because you don't count a half a year. So a year and a half is really 2 years. How much would he have to pay? He would pay 2 selas and 2 pidyonim, right? But points out the Gemara that wait a second, hekdesh, if it wanted to make more money, would have a better cheshbon. What would hekdesh say? We learned yesterday that Rav and Shmuel Damri Tavayu, both Rav and Shmuel point out that if it's during the 2 years preceding Yovel that someone is poda a field, then how much should we say he has to pay? He has to pay all 50 slayim. He doesn't get menigra me'arkacha. He doesn't get to reduce and only pay a sell and a putyin per year. So it's in hekdesh's interest to say, wait a second, a year and a half is not 2 years, it's a year and a half, and therefore it's less than the 2 year mark, and therefore I should be able to do it. It says the kohen should calculate in whichever way is best for a hekdesh. Interesting machlokas rishonim here about exactly what this means. Multiple views. Rashi seems to be of the opinion that you have to. In other words, Rashi's less clear, but in other words, the question is: Do you say that that hekdesh for sure should treat it as a year and a half left and demand a padiyah of 50? Or, like the Rambam learns, that hekdesh has a choice. So now the question, in other words, do they want to let someone redeem it for 2 sela and 2 pinyonim, or do they make him redeem it for 50? That's hekdesh's choice. Why would hekdesh choose to take less? Because sometimes you're not helping someone by making, in other words, if you make the price so extreme that for someone to get this field for the next year and a half, they have to pay 50 slayim, they're going to say no. So then hekdesh is just going to sit on a field and get nothing from it. So according to those Rishonim, they would learn that hekdesh can make that decision. And it's also interesting because you see that the Gemara doesn't, the brayso doesn't pick up the language of the Mishnah, which said that hekdesh mechashiv chadashim, but rather what does the brayso say? It says minayim shem atarotza lasos chadashim lashana osa. Where do I know that if you want to count months, you can? So it seems to be supporting the view of the Rambam that, and maybe that's why it picks a different lashon than the Mishnah to tell you that Hekdesh has a choice based on what its judgment as to what it'll get, because it's better to get 2 selas and 2 pinyonim than to get nothing. But obviously, if there will be people who will pay 50 slayim for it, then Hekdesh should do that and get the maximum amount for Hekdesh. So we're picking up at the Mishnah, the second wide line on Chafei Amud Aleph. Says the Mishnah, Hamakdish Sadeu B'Shasa Yovel. So this is a halacha that we've encountered and talked about, but this is the source in the Mishnah, that if someone is Makdish his field in the Yovel year, no saying, Bezera Chomer Sa'orim Chamishim Shekel Kesef. So it says as follows, that there's a simple calculation that's applied, and it doesn't matter what the value of the field is. If someone is makdish his stei achuza and he wants to redeem it, so it's 50 slayim per zera chomer sa'orim. What is and then we said it gets reduced based on the years. What is a zera chomer sa'orim? It's the area that a chomer of seeds. A chomer is also similar. In other words, the Gemara uses the word kor. So it's the same thing. A kor or a chomer is really 30 sa. So in other words, it's how large of a field you require in order that you would plant 30 sa of seeds in that area. And that's the amount that's chamishim shekel. So there's a fascinating, the Gon says something beautiful in Adar Salyo in Chayesara. He points out as follows, that how do we get this whole calculation? Because we know that the Mishkan was 50 by 100, so it was 5,000 square amas, and we know that the area of the Mishkan was such that could be planted 2 sa of seeds. So if 2 sa of seeds goes in 5,000 amas and 5,000 square amas, and we need 30 sa, so then it's going to be that a base core is 75,000 square amas. Says the Gon that if you would have 8 base cores, you would get to I'm sorry. So if you'd get to 8 base cores, so it's 8 times 75,000 amos would be 600,000 amos. So says the Gon as follows, that we know from the Gemara in Ksubas that at Sarah's Levaya, the Hesped, that there were 600,000 people at her Hesped. And we know from the Gemara in Sukkah that Gavra Ba'am Yasva, that a person takes up 1 amma of space. So he says as follows, that if Avram Avinu wanted to buy land for Sarah's Hesped, and he was having 600,000 people, he needs 600,000 amas. So he bought 8 base core for how much? Arba Mea shekel kesef, 400 shekel kesef. So if you have 8 base core for 400 shekel kesef, how much are you paying per base core? 50 shkalim. So says the Gon, that's the same calculation that we're using here is the calculation that Avram Avinu used in determining the value of the field with Ephron Achiti. In any event, continues the Mishnah, Hayisham nekayim amukim asar tfachim asloim gavayim asar tfachim ein nimdaden imo. So it says as follows, when we have this field, what happens if in the middle of the field are these little ditches or rocks that come up? So a ditch that's deep asar tvachim, or rocks that are high asar tvachim. So then we say that's not counted in the field. Now, what it means not to be counted, big machlokas rishonim, at least 4 views on that. But in any event, it's not counted in the calculation that we're going to do here. The rishonim discuss. We talk here about how deep it is, but the question is how wide does this ditch need to be to the point, or the rock coming up that you wouldn't count it? So the Rashba learns that it's 4 tfachim. Why? Because we know on Shabbos that if you have something that's 4 tfachim by 10 tfachim tall or deep, then that's considered a separate rishus for rishus hayachid. The Meiri and others would say it's 3 tfachim, presumably because less than 3 tfachim you would consider it as if it's closed. But in any event, that seems to be the Rashba brings that the Yerushalmi brings different views on this as well. In any event, continues the Mishnah, Pachos Mikan, if you have these little ditches or these stone outcroppings that come up, if they're less than 10 tvachim tall, then nimdad and imo, then you just count them into the same calculation when you're figuring out the size of the field. You don't subtract for these stones or these ditches. Hekdesha shtayim u'shalosh shanim lefnei hayovel. So this is the idea of which we see from the psukim that you reduce per number of years. So if someone is makdish or redeems it really 2 or 3 years before the yovel, nosen selo pundyan l'shana. He pays a sela and a pundyan per year. We talked about it yesterday. Basically, if you're dividing 50 shekel kesef for 50 slayim by 49 years, so each year it's a sela and a pudyon plus the kalbon. We talked about that one extra pudyon. We talked about that yesterday. Now what happens? If hareini nosin davar shanam b'shanam, ein shalman lo. Ela nosin is kulo ke'echad. So we say as follows: that if someone says, "I want to be on an installment plan, there's 10 years left, so I have to pay 10 slayim and 10 pinyonim. So let me pay a sela and a pudyon per year to hektish." So the Mishnah says, no, it doesn't work like that. You have to pay the whole thing at once. Explains the Brisker of what's going on here is because we're going to see as we're going to talk. If someone was makdish his field, right? If he's not poded right away before someone else has poded it, he loses it as a steachuz. It's going to end up going to the kohanim. We'll deal with that in a little bit. So what's going on here? The guy says, wait a second, I was makdish my field, but I don't want to lose it, so let me start an installment plan with hekdesh, and that's why someone's trying to do that. But says the Mishnah, no, that doesn't work. Continues the Mishnah. Echad bailam ve'echad kol adam. That the way most Rishonim understand this, that what this is going back on is saying that this is true. This rate of redemption, 50 shekel or 50 slayim per a zera chomer sorim or base core. This is the rate, regardless of who's redeeming it, whether it is the owner redeeming it or any other person. In other words, once someone is makdish or steachuz at the hektish, regardless of its true value, this is the formula for whoever wants to be podet, whether it's the owner who's going to be podet or it's any other person who's going to be podet. So ma bein bailam l'chol adam. So then, what's the difference between an owner and anyone else? Elo shebailam nosin chomesh v'chol adam ein nosin chomesh. That when it's the owner who wants to redeem his own field, then he has to add on 1/5. And versus if a regular person was doing it, wouldn't have to add on 1/5. So the formula of the 50 slayim per base core, that's the formula used for everyone. But the owner has to add on a chomesh on top of it. Says the Maral and Goraye, an interesting thing about where does this idea come from that the owner has to pay an extra chomesh. So the Maral says it's not like some penalty or something. He says it's simply the value of the field. He says why? Because a person, especially when you're dealing with a steachuza, and this is his ancestral homeland, but even forgetting steachuza, just regularly when someone has something, it's valuable to him. So what's the idea? The idea is that when you have to redeem it for value, this field that's mine is worth more to me than it is to someone else. Someone else will say, I don't care, I'll buy this field, I'll buy a different field. For me, I want my own field. So says the Maral, that's just the valuation. It's not a penalty. It's just the valuation. It's worth more to me, this field, than it is to anyone else. So I have to pay more. As the owner, I pay an additional chomesh, whereas another person would not pay. It says the Gemara, Tana kur zera v'loy kur tvua. So he says, all right, when we talk about, in other words, we say zera chomer sa'orim is talking about not where, in other words, a kur, which we said is 30 sa. So you could think maybe it means a field that I harvest 30 sa worth of crops. So says the Mishnah, no, it's 30 sa worth of seeds. Now, obviously, if one seed produces many grains, right? So then it is more. If I was saying that whatever produces 30 sa of grain or crops is what I have to pay 50 shkalim, is going to be way more than if I have to pay for the same 50 shkalim for a much bigger piece of land that it would take to plant 50 sa of seeds. So the Brisa says we're talking seeds, we're not talking crops. Mapolis yad v'lo mapolis shvarim. And when we're talking about it when someone hand seeds it, not when they use it with shvarim. Some Rishonim understand it's a wagon, but Rashi just explains that how would they do this? That they would, in other words, instead of walking around with a big bag of seed, they would take an animal, they would put the seed on the back of the animal, they would cut some holes in the bottom of the bag, and as the animal would go, the seeds would fall out, and they would do it over the plowed field, and this way, the field would get seeded, and the guy doesn't have to schlep the bag. Now, So presumably this is easier on their farmer. The consequence, though, is that more seeds fall out through this process than if you were taking it by hand. If you're taking by hand, you're more careful. So says the Mishnah, we're talking about mapolis yad and not mapolis shvarim, and therefore the space that'll get covered by a base core worth of zera is larger because you're being more careful with how much you're planting. Tana Levi, lo mu'uva v'lo meidak elo beinani. And Levi says, and so we're not talking about a thick planting where you put lots of seeds per square foot or inch or base core, and nor is it particularly thin. So if you do a thick planting, I guess like you have, like they always tell you, you got aeration and overseeding. So that would be thick, like overseeding. So the idea is you're using up more of the seeds in a smaller area. So the person who has to redeem it is getting ripped off in that case. Or Medak, if you make it too, you just put a few seeds here and there, you're going to cover a much larger area, and Hekdesh is going to get ripped off. Says Levi, Ela Beinani, you use a regular measure, you put the right amount of seeds, you do it by hand, and you do seeds and not crops, and that's how we determine the value. So we said, if you have these little ditches in the field, that it's not counted. So ask the Gemara, so differences in the Rishonim about how they learn it, but let's just go with Rashi's shot. Rashi's asking a question. It says, hold on a second. Okay, so you're telling me you're going to count these little ditches separately, right? So he says, but you're going to count them separately, and how much are you going to charge? You're going to charge a zera chomer sorim. So he says, so what difference does it make? In other words, why are you going to make it a separate count and then use the same rate of calculation? You may as well just measure them all together. So what's going on here? The Gemara says, maybe you'll tell me, kiven de lo have a base core, lo have a kadshe. So maybe you'll tell me, well, there's a reason, because since I can only be poda using this formula if it's a full base core. So if it was less than a base core, I couldn't. So therefore, it's telling me that when I'm measuring this base core, I do or I don't include these ditches makes a difference as to whether I can do pedia redemption at this rate of 50 slayim per base core. So maybe that's why it matters whether you measure them separately. So the Gemara says, no, Tanya, we learned in a brayso, sada matam lomar, that what does it tell you? What does it tell you when it uses the word sada? Lefi shenemar, because it says, so the pasuk says, v'im mistei achuzaso yakdesh ish laHashem, that is, if a person from his field of his achuza is makdish to Hashem, so this word sada you don't really need. Rashi points out that you could say it could have written v'imei achuzaso yakdish ish. Why does that say mistei achuzaso yakdish ish? So in other words, what did it add by that word sada? So he says, so since it says that you pay 50 shekel per zera chomer sorim, maybe that's only so if you were makdish an area of a base core, 75,000 square amas, that only then you're poded at 50 shkalim per that area. Minayin l'rabas lesech v'chati lesech sa v'tarkav v'chati tarkav. A lesech is a half of a core, so that's 15 saw. A chati lesech is 7.5 saw. Saw is a single saw. Tarkav is a half of a saw. A chati tarkav is a quarter of a saw. Whatever. If you do some lesser measure, Talmud Omer, stay v'yim mistei achuzaso sada mikol makom. Whatever is a field, whether it's a full base core, a half a base core, a quarter base core, doesn't matter. You still use the same formula. So we're left with our question: what is the reason that the Mishnah is distinguishing that this you measure the ditches you measure separately if it's the same rate, so just measure them all together. He says, no, what are we talking about when we say you have these ditches? According to Rashi, if it's a regular ditch that could be cultivated, in fact, you would count it in the same measure. When do we exclude a ditch or a rock is when it's not capable of being planted. For example, if it's filled with water. Now, this is an interesting thing. The Rashba points out that it has to be, and this he really is on the Mishnah, but it makes more sense here when we see that we're talking about something that's filled with water. He says it would have to be talking about where this water is not used for irrigation. If it's used for irrigation, then you would count it because it's an integral part of the field. This is important. Why? Because we know that if someone is makdish a sada, we learn in Bava Basra, that includes a bar and a dos, which are water things. So the question is, why would you count it when he's makdish it, but not count it when you redeem it? So we're saying no. When you redeem it, if it's used for irrigation, for sure it's counted with it. But if it's a malayim, it's in the koyim malayim mayim, that's not b'nei zriya, it's not used for irrigation. So then the idea is those are excluded. Why? Because it's zera chomer sa'orim, the area that you can plant a chomer of zera, and if there's a part of the area that's not plantable, it's not arable, so then obviously it shouldn't be included. It says the Gemara, Dekanami, this also makes sense in our mission, the Katani dumya deslayim. So as we learned that these ditches are similar to rocks. So just like rocks can't be planted on because you can't put a seed into rock, so too these ditches that we're talking about are ditches that are not amenable to planting. Shema Mina. In fact, that is the proof that that's what we're dealing with. So says the Gemara, wait a second, if we're talking about, if you're telling me you exclude areas that are ineligible for planting, so then ihachi, if so, pachas mikan nami, then why do you say that if you have a ditch that's 10 amas deep, but if it's less than 10 amas, you count it with it, or if you have a rock that's 10 amas tall, it's excluded, but if it's only 10 tvachim tall, it's excluded, but if it's only 5 tvachim tall, it would be included. But wait a second, that's not plantable either. A 5 tefach rock is no more plantable than a 10 tefach rock. So you should exclude any size rock. Says the Gemara, Hanu Nagani Da'ara Mikri, Sidri Da'ara Nikri. He says these are called, Nagani is like Rashi says a shuffle, like a bowl. But he's saying basically, and Rashi seems to be focusing on how people call it. In other words, they call it the bowls of the ground, or they call the stones the spine of the ground. Rashi said just like the spine comes at the top of an animal, begova, so too the stones are on the land. They come up, but that's just the spine of the land. So basically Rashi is saying that's considered part of the land. When you refer to the land, you say, okay, that's the spine of the land, that's the bowls of the land that are filled with water, but in other words, you wouldn't consider them a separate existence from the land, and that's why you refer to them as Sidri Da'ara, Nagani Da'ara. But once it's over 10 tvachim or 10 tvachim deep, then you don't refer to it as part of the land, you refer to it as an independent ditch or an independent stone, and that's the point at which we would exclude it. Continues the Gemara. The Gemara quotes the Mishnah. So we said if you're redeeming a field 2 or 3 years before the end of the Yovel cycle, you'll pay a selah pinyon per year. 2 years before it would be 2 selahs and 2 pinyonim, or 3. So it says the Gemara Tanarabanan. We say that you should reduce from the erech, from the value that you give this field. Each year you reduce it by a selah and a pudyan. So says the Brisa, af mina hektish. This is true even from hektish. She'im achla hektish shana oshtayim inami lo achla shaisa lefanav nosin selah pudyan l'shana. So what we're saying is as follows: that you might think, and I mean I'll just read it again afterwards, but let me explain it. You might think that maybe if I 25 years into the Yovel cycle am makdish something to hektish, so fine, I then set the value at 25 that I have to redeem it, but I have to ultimately redeem from hektish at the value I gave it to hektish. So the Gemara says, the Brisa says no. He says even while it's in hektish, the nigra me'akecha keeps ticking down. Every year it goes down a selah and pudyan, even if it was in Hektish's possession. And says the Brisa, even if Hektish did nothing with it. So Hektish got zero benefit. So I was makdish it to Hektish 25 years in. So at that point, the redemption price will be 25 salim and 25 punyonim. Hektish gets no value from it. 5 years later, I redeem it. I don't have to redeem it at 25 selah and pinyonim. I can redeem it at 20 selah and 20 pinyonim because the clock continues to tick during Hektish. So that's what we say, Shemachla Hektish Shana Shtayim, that if Hektish had it for a year or two, Inami Lo Achla Ela Shai Selafanav, or Hektish really didn't do anything with it. So Hektish didn't get any monetary benefit. Nonetheless, no Sinselo Punyan Lashana, which we learned from the Nigra Me'erkecha, that it ticks down. It doesn't matter whether Hektish got real benefit from it or not. Says the Gemara, V'im Amar Hareini Nosein. So this is the guy who wanted to give the installment plan. So we talked about this in the Mishnah. Tanarabanan in the Brisa, it says, "Minayin shem amru bailam hareini nosin davar shana b'shana shein shomon lahem." So how do I know that if the it's interesting because here here we say the Bailam, that if the Bailam say it, so that references what I said before with the Brisker Rav. But in any event, that if the buyer says, let me pay you a selam pudyon per year on an installment plan, we don't let him do it. We don't listen to do that. Talmud, therefore it says, V'chishev lo hakohen es hakesef, ashiyeh kesef kulo ke'echad. That you count, the coin calculates es hakesef, the money, and then you have to pay the whole thing. Ashiyeh kesef kulo ke'echad, that you pay the hakesef, the money, in one flat payment. You can't do an installment plan. The Brisa continues, really just quoting our Mishnah, Echad Bailam Echad Kol Adam, that this redemption is so, whether it's the owner who's redeeming it or any other person. Ma ben Bailam L'Chol Adam. What's the difference between the Bailam and any other person? Shah Bailam Nosin Chomesh V'Chol Adam Ein Nosin Chomesh. That the owner, when he's redeeming a ste'achuza, on top of the selam pudyon, has to pay an extra fifth. And which is really a fourth, because it's chomesh movar, but and whereas a regular person would not need to do that. Says the Mishnah, 5 lines from the bottom, Chav Hey Amud Aleph. Hekdesha v'gala eina yotze miyada b'yovel. That, anyone have a chomesh handy? Vayikra. Okay. All right. So just to, I'll read the psukim in a minute if someone has it. So we're now talking about what happens when someone is makdish a ste'achuza. Thank you very much. So the psukim at end of Vayikra in B'chukosai talk about all these halachas, and we say as follows. So it says that if someone is makdish is ste'achuza, so it says you calculate this thing, how many years are left. And Nigar Me'arkacha says the pasuk Yates v'imgal yigal asasada hamakdish also, that if the person who is makdish it is gal the field v'yosef chamishis kesef erkacha alav v'kamlo. So this is what we just said, that he pays the extra chomesh and it's his. So in other words, basically, if someone's makdish a field and then they're poded from hekdish, it stays in their possession. V'im lo yigas hasada, and if he does not redeem the field, v'im macher hasada li'ish acher, and if hekdish sells the field to someone else before he was goel it, too bad, lo yigal owed, he can no longer redeem it, and he loses his ste'achuza, it's gone from his possession. V'haya hasada. So then the question is, what happens? Hekdish sold it to someone for whatever amount they sold it, but when it comes to the Yovel, it's going to go back, it's going to go somewhere. It doesn't stay with that guy. He only paid a selam pudyon per remaining year. So where does it go? It says the pasuk, Vayovel Kodesh Hashem, that the sada, when it goes out from Yovel, from whoever bought it, is Kodesh Hashem, Kistei Acherim, that it's like a sada that's a Acherim, like Kohen Tiach, who's also goes to the Kohanim. So that's the basic idea. We talked about this a little bit yesterday when we talked about whether the Kohanim have to pay or not, which is the Mishnah we're going to learn now, but we're going to learn today. But this is what the Torah says. Basically, if someone's makdish a ste'achuza, he should immediately be goel if he can, because if anyone else is goel it's gone from him. It's no longer a ste'achuza, and instead of coming back to him at Yovel, it's going to go to the Kohanim, and it's going to be lost. So he has that chance to be goel but if someone jumps ahead of him, then too late, it's gone. So says the Mishnah, that if someone is makdish a field and he's goel so like the pasuk says, the come low, it goes to him. It doesn't go to anyone else. Yovel doesn't go to the Kohanim. This is an interesting halacha which we're going to explore a little bit in the Gemara, that a son is kind of like his father. So if the son is the one who's poded, he doesn't get to keep it, but his father gets to keep it. So in other words, it's not lost. So even though it's someone other than the father who was poded, nonetheless, it stays in the family and it stays as a ste'achuza. So if it's just some stranger, or even if it's some relative who's not a son, then the gala miyado, and they took it. I'm sorry. And then the father or the man who was makdish it, so one of his relatives or some stranger bought it from hekdish, and then the father or the makdish buys it from whoever bought it. In other words, so Reuven was makdish a field, hekdish sold it to Shimon. Reuven went to Shimon and said, "Let me buy the field." So now he repurchased his ste'achuza, and according to the girsa we have in our Mishnah, yotze lekohanim b'yovel. That still goes to the Kohanim in Yovel. Maybe we'll deal with it tomorrow, but the Shita discusses a different girsa, which is I think the Rambam has that girsa. The Ramban, the Shita says, has this girsa, says that it does not go to the Kohanim in Yovel, which is obviously diametrically opposite psak. But the way we have it, Rashi's girsa and our Gemar's girsa is too bad. At the end of the day, when Ruvain was makdish the field, so it goes to Hektish. Hektish is selling to Shimon what? He's selling the difference between the point at which Shimon is redeeming it and the end of Yovel. So he's paying a sell and putting him per year. So all Shimon bought was the right to use it till Yovel. So if Ruvain now goes to Shimon in an off-market transaction and says, I want to buy back my field that Hektish sold you, he can buy it, but he'll only get what Shimon has to sell him, which is the remaining years till Yovel. It doesn't return to him to be a stei achuzah, and it'll go out to the Kohanim in Yovel. That's the way our girsa, the girsa of our Gemara and our Mishnah is. Okay. Okay. What happens if a Kohen was the guy who bought the stei achuzah from Hektish? So now the owner is never getting it back. So what's going to happen? At Yovel, it's supposed to go to the Kohanim. Lo yomar ho v'hi yotza l'kohanim b'Yovel v'harei hi tachas yado harei hi shali. So he says the Kohen can't say, look, anyway, what's going to happen at Yovel? It's going to go to the Kohanim. But I'm already the one who has it, so I'll keep it. Which, by the way, we see that halacha by other matnas kahuna, that if the Kohen is the one who ends up with it, then he can end up just keeping it, and he could say, I have it already. Presumably, the difference here is that we're going to see that really what happens to this field is it gets divided. In other words, truma, any Kohen can get the whole truma. So if he has it already, he says, okay, it's mine. But in this case, we're going to see that the field gets divided amongst the Kohanim in the Mishmar. So he's only supposed to get a little portion, so he can't make this claim. Says the Mishnah, he can try saying it should go to me, but it's not true. That it goes out from under his hand and it gets split between all his brothers, the Kohanim. Now, who's it talking about? It's not talking about all Kohanim. It gets split between the Mishmar that happens to be working that year during the Yovel year. So, and when does this happen? Rashi is going to learn that it's going to be on Yom Kippur, because that's when the fields got released. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur gets divided to the Kohanim. So it's an interesting thing. If you're that Mishmar who by Yovel happens to be the Mishmar at that time, you get this tremendous bonus, because all of a sudden all the stei achuzas that went to Hektish and didn't get redeemed come to these Kohanim and they got to split it. So luck of the draw. Okay, continues Amud Beis, the Gemara. Taner Rabbanan. We learn as follows: Imlo yigal es hasada. So this is interesting, Brisa. It's like kind of identifying all the players in a pasuk here. The pasuk says that if he is not goal the sada, who's that talking about? Bailam. If the owner is not goal the sada, then v'yamachar es hasada, and if the field got sold by Hektish, so who's that? Gizbar, the treasurer of Hektish. Leish acher, and he says he sold the field to some other man. La'acher v'lo leben. So says the Brisa, when we're referring to it sold to a different person, it's talking about a stranger or some other relative, but not a son. This is the halakha we learned in the Mishnah, that if the son is the one who redeemed it, then it stays in the family as a stei achuzah, and it's not lost and go to the Kohanim. So says the Brisa, Ata omer la'acher v'lo leben. So you learned that when it says that it's sold to an acher, it excludes a ben, because a ben, it's not lost when it's sold to a son. He says, O eina la'acher v'lo la'ach. He says, how do you know that it should be that the son who's an exception to the rule, and maybe it should be the brother, because the pasuk doesn't say. We're going to see in a second. It says the Brisa, Kishu Omer Ish. When it says man, so this is the pasuk. The pasuk says v'machar sasada leish acher. It's sold to a different man, not just la'acher. Harei ach omer. So a brother is included in that, in the ish. And so therefore, when it says ish acher, it includes a brother. So when a brother redeems the field, it's still lost as a stei achuzah. It's only the son who's like the father that it stays in the family. So what are we dealing with? We're dealing with two words. Ish includes someone, so we're saying it includes anyone, including a brother, and acher excludes someone, ish acher, but it excludes a son. So the question is, we have one inclusive word, ish, we have one exclusive word, acher, and we're saying acher is the son, ish is a brother. So we say Hamani Mekayim Acher. So he says Mani Mekayim Acher v'lo leben. So it's saying when it says acher, it's excluding the son, and when it says ish, it's including the brother. So therefore, the son is an exception to the rule, but the brother is not. So ask the Gemara, Ma royis lo Rabbi says ben so he says, well, 1 second. In other words, you have a brother who's close to a father, and you have a son who's close to a father. So you just have one word that includes someone and one word that excludes someone. How do you know to exclude the son and include the brother? Maybe you should exclude the brother and include the son and say that only a brother who's poda, his brother's field, doesn't stay in the family. So the Gemara says, no, because a son has a greater connection to being the replacement of his father, because if you're thinking about what's happening here, it's saying if the father is not golet, there's one other person who can be golet, and it says if the father did it, makes more sense that the son, because we see that the son steps into the shoes of the father in 2 instances. Marbani ben, I include the son, shekain kam tachas aviv li'ido ule'evet ivri. So there's 2 areas where a son steps into the shoes of the father. One is Yud, and one is Evet Ivri. What's the halach of Yud? Yud, we know that if an Amma Ivriya is sold to a master when she's a katana, and so let's say she's sold, she has 6 years remaining, 3 years have passed, someone could be goal her for $300, or if the owner wants to marry her, or even if the son of the owner wants to marry her, so then without having to give any kesef of kiddushin, they can be makdash her with the remaining value. In other words, there's $300 remaining. So the son can just decide, I'm going to marry this that if the son says, I'm going to marry her, he doesn't have to give her any kesef of kiddushin, and that's a valid marriage. So what do you see? That the father can marry the amma that he bought, or the son can do it. And then the pasuk says, if they haven't done any of this, then she goes free when she becomes a naro. But in any event, you see that a son steps into the shoes of the father. Similarly with Evet Ivri, that we know the halacha is that an Evet Ivri serves for 6 years. If the master dies, so then it depends. If the son is the one if the son is alive and he's Yorish's father, so then the Evet Ivri has to serve the son. But let's say there's no son and no daughters, and it goes to the brother, or even to the daughters. So then, I think to the daughters. So then, what happens then is that the Evet Ivri goes free. So if there's no son and the assets go to the brother, it goes free. So you see that a son steps into the shoes of his father, both in the ability to do yud and in the ability to keep an Evet Ivri. So you see that a son is like his father. Says the Gemara, Adrabba, Marbani Sanach, Shekin Kam Tachas Achiv Liibum. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. Maybe instead of saying that a son steps into the shoes of a father, because you see by Yud and Evet Ivri, what about the fact that a brother steps into the shoes of the brother when he does Yibum to his wife if there's no children? So what do you see? And says so people, the Mepharshim discuss, what's the Havamina? That the brother, in other words, why should Yibum be closer than a son? So we say because v'kam tachas achiv ameis, that's the function of Yibum, is that he steps into the shoes of his brother and he keeps his name alive. So maybe you would think that it should be the brother. So the Gemara says, Klum yesh Yibum ela b'makom shein ben, ha yesh ben ein Yibum. He says, no, if I'm choosing between a son and a brother, the son is obviously more close, because the son can do Yud and Evet Ivri in any case. A brother can only do Yibum if there's no son around. But if a son is around, there isn't even a halach of Yibum, because Yibum only applies when the guy had no children. So you see that a son is a greater connection than the brother through Yibum, because Yibum wouldn't even happen if there's a son there. So it says the Gemara, wait a second. What happened here? I told you there's 2 ways a son is like a father, and one way that a brother is like his brother. So why did you have to tell me this cheshbon that a son is stronger because Yibum only applies when the son's not around? Just tell me that there's 2 ways the son is like a father, and only one way that a brother is like the father. So therefore, it should be that. But typically, the hachatartiv hachacha, to say that here there's 2 and here there's 1. So we say mishum the Evet Ivri me hai pircha nami hu the nafkilei. Klum yeshibum ela b'makom shein ben. So he says as follows. He says, no, in the Havamina, the Gemara was treating it as follows. You have Yud and Evet Ivri, which are 2 ways in which a son steps in, and you have Yibum, which is a way that the brother steps in. So I would say 2 is more than 1. But says the Gemara, no, really what you have is you have 1 and 1, and then you have 2 uncertainties. So what's it saying? For sure, a son does Yid. The Torah is very clear about that. For sure, a brother does Yibum. So they're each similar. The son is similar to his father, brother is similar to his brother. But the question is, we have two areas. One is Evet Ivri, and one is Stei Achuza, where we have one inclusive term and one exclusive term. And the question is, which do you apply to a brother? So the way we determined Evet Ivri, the Gemara in Kedushin figures this out, is the same thing. Says, well, should I apply the halacha that the Evet doesn't go out? Should I apply it to a brother or to a son? And the cheshbon that they make is that, is there such a thing as yibum if the son is around? So it must be the son is stronger. So it's not like you had 2 and 1. You had 1 and 1. You had yud and you had yibum. You had two uncertainties. So you need to come onto this argument to say that the son is stronger than a brother, because you see that that there is no yibum when the son is around. Once we know that the son is stronger than a brother, so we figure out both by Evet Ivri and by Stei Achuza that who is it that steps into the shoes of the father to be able to keep the Evet Ivri or to be able to be go the Stei Achuza. That's a son, not a brother. Ask the Gemara. Bari Rabbi Baravua. Rabbi Baravua asked the following question: Bas mahu shetamid stei asad la'aviyah. So we say, what about if a man was makdish a field and he was not golet, but his daughter bought it from hektish? So do we say kivin delini yibum ben ubas kiadadi patri mukma? So maybe I'll tell you that this is good, that the father should be able to keep it in his field. Why? Because you see that both a son and daughter, if a man has either a son or daughter, there's no yibum, and we're going to say that therefore she should be a valid party to be able to redeem it. And then it stays within the family. Or Dilmar, maybe you say that maybe since by inheritance you see that a daughter is irrelevant, meaning if there's a son there, the daughter doesn't matter. The daughter doesn't get any of the nachla. It's only if the son isn't there. So then lo mukma. So maybe it would not. She would not establish. To maintain the field, the Stei Achuza within the father's possession. So it says the Gemara Tashma, coming here to Tanit Be'er Rishmo, because we learned in Tanit Be'er Rishmo, Koshu Acher b'makom ben v'ha nami b'makom ben ki acher damya. So we say that the measure is that anyone who would be considered an acher where there's a son is excluded. And so we're saying, is included in ish acher. So we're saying here that when the son is present, the daughter is irrelevant. Meaning, because if the son is there, the daughter gets no element of Yerusha. So therefore it shows us that a daughter is not a factor for purposes of this, and she's treated as an acher. She's treated as ish acher, and as ish really included, and therefore she would not save the. So if Ruvain was makdish the field to Hektish, and Hektish sold it to Ruvain's daughter, at the end of at Yovel, the field will go to the Kohanim and will not go back to Ruvain. Okay, says the Gemara. Bayi Reb Zera asked the following question: Isha mimamid lasada. So it said, who is it that if a woman is makdish a field, she's makdish some of her lug possessions. So we say, who is it that can be her plus one, the person who can redeem aside from her? Do we say Baal Mukim Lashaken Yarsha? Maybe it should be the husband, because the husband, as Rashi points out, is Yorish, his wife, even if a son is around. So maybe it should be the husband who's the other one who can redeem the field. Odilma ben mukim lashaken nota baroy kavamachzik. Maybe I'll tell you that it's the son who should do it, because you see that a son has a greater power of Yerusha of his mother. If he's the one who's Yerush, if, for example, his mother's not married, not only is he Yoresh the things that are in her possession at that time, but he's also Yoresh the Roi, the things that are going to come later. So you see, versus a husband only gets the Muchzik, he doesn't get the Roi. So you see that a son is somewhat stronger than a husband in inheritance of a woman. So who is this woman's plus one who can be pulled to the field and it stays in the family? Is it the husband or is it the son? Says the Gemara, Teku, we don't know. Okay, Rami Bar Chama asked Rav Chisda, so he says, let me ask you a question. What happens if someone was poda a field with a year left to Hegdish, let's say? Does it go out to the Kohanim? So he buys the field, and the question is, does it go out to the Kohanim? Now, the Gemara is going to say, what's the reason you would think that? Because the pasuk of this whole parsha says, that you reduce the field, the cost, so that it's a sell and pudyum by every year. And then it says, and the sada goes out in Yovel to the Kohanim. So therefore I'm going to say, the baski roin in, the la baski roin low. So I would tell you, maybe that it's only when a field is subject to reduction by a sela and pundian every year that the halacha of going to the Kohanim applies. But maybe if someone is poda a field, let's think about this. Remember, we've said this, that if someone's poda a field a year before Hekdesh, how much does he pay? 50 slayim. So since Giron Kesef is not applying in that transaction, then just like Giron Kesef, which is written in the earlier pasuk, does not apply 2 years before Yovel, then maybe also it going out to Kohanim doesn't apply 2 years before Yovel. So the Gemara says, that's your thought. Adarabba, imlo yigar asada, v'haya asada b'teisa b'yovel, v'hay nami ba'askulahi. He says the pasuk actually, which is much closer, it's the pasuk immediately before the one that talks about going to the Kohanim. It says, imlo yigar asada, if the sada is not redeemed, it doesn't talk about whether it's redeemed for less than the cost or the cost, and it says the sada goes out to Yovel, goes to the Kohanim, v'hay nami ba'askulahi. This field that had Geula a year before Yovel was still redeemed, and therefore the next pasuk which says a field that was not redeemed by the owner and redeemed by someone else goes to the Kohanim, so it continues to go to the Kohanim even if it was done less than 2 years before Yovel. Gola echad min haKohanim. So we said as follows, Taner Rabbanon. So this is the source for the idea that a Kohen can't say, I'm the one who gets it. LeKohen tia achuzaso. It says that the Kohen, that this is the pasuk. It says v'haya asada b'teisa b'yovel l'kodesh Hashem kistei acherim LeKohen tia achuzaso. So it could have just said LeKohen tia. It should go to the Kohen. Why does it say LeKohen tia achuzaso? So matam alomer. What is it telling you, this word achuzaso? So we say as follows: Minayin l'sadashiyot to the Kohanim b'yovel v'gola echad min haKohanim. So if I have this case where someone that if you have a field that's going out to the Kohanim in the Yovel, meaning that and someone was makdash a field and the Kohen was someone who was goalit, how do I know? So he says, how do I know that I can't make the cheshbon? The Kohen's going to say, well, look, since I'm in possession of it now and it's going to go to Kohanim anyway, let me take it. This was the case in the Mishnah. And now the Brisa adds a kal v'chomer that he makes. V'dinhu, and he says as follows, that when I'm part of the Mishmar, Rashi in Baba Kama says expressly, when I'm part of the Mishmar that's going to get it, so then I get a piece of the field, even though I'm not the owner of the field. Meaning, if Reuven sold to Shimon, at Yovel, Shimon releases the field, it goes to the Kohanim, and this guy's going to get a little piece. So he says, from a field I don't own, I get some of it. But shall ask me lo kol shekin, and the field I currently own because I bought it from Hekdesh, shouldn't I get the whole thing? Tamalomar, therefore it says achuzasa shelo ve'ein zeh shelo. So it says that the pasuk says l'kohen tia achuzasa. So even though really that means that the Kohen should have the achuza of the guy who was makdash and not goel it, the way we're reading is l'kohen tia achuzasa, that the Kohen should get his own achuza, what comes from his father, but what comes to him, in other words, what comes to him by virtue of inheritance from his father he has, but what comes to him by virtue of being a Kohen, that at the end of Yovel gets split amongst the Kohanim, that he does not get anything more than his brothers, the Kohanim, and he has to be part of the division. He doesn't get to keep it, even though he's currently the owner for this period of time. How is that? It goes out from his hand, and it gets split among the Kohanim. Okay, we'll end there.